Good afternoon, everybody. Paul Atkinson from Bridlington Paranormal Investigators. As promised, we're obviously at Pendle Hill this weekend, investigating this evening, which we're looking forward to. The little treat that we got for you, that we said we've got an interview now at Clitheroe Castle with Simon Entwistle. He's a published author and he runs a lot of the ghost tours and everything around here in the Pendle area. He's actually got a ghost tour going on tonight as well. And he's done a lot of work with some of the bigger groups that do the documentaries as well. So Simon's kindly agreed just to do a little bit of a background and a history on Pendle Hill for you all. So I'll just turn the camera around and Simon will have a chat with you.
Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this beautiful part of the world. This is Pendle Hill, right behind me. One of the most famous hills in the whole of Great Britain. Now, by far the biggest attraction relating to Pendle Hill is the story of the Pendle Witches. But let's go back in time. First of all, the view behind you would have been a huge forest called the Forest of Pendle, which would have gone right round the whole hill itself. Now, in the year 1603, we lost Queen Elizabeth I. She was replaced by King James VI of Scotland, who then became King James I of England. He was absolutely paranoid about witches. He not only believed that witches existed, he believed they were actually out to get him. On becoming King of England, he wrote a book called Demonology. You can buy Demonology today from any leading bookshop, and as you pick it up, first chapter, how to find a witch, how to try a witch, and most importantly, how to eradicate a witch. Now, the king was an ardent Protestant, and he hated the Catholics with a vengeance. The whole of East Lancashire to this very, very day has very, very strong Catholic connections. The wealthy families like the Southwards of Salisbury Hall, the Shireburns of Ribble Valley, the Townleys of Burnley, they were all Catholics. So therefore the king had his suspicion of this area. Caught up in all this paranoia were a group of people that were going to go down in history as the Pendle Witches. Who were they? Well, first of all, there were two very, very elderly ladies, over 85 years old, commonly known as Demdike and Chattox. Both women had defied the laws of nature because life expectancy, if you were lucky, would be 35. These two women knew all about herbs, they knew all about plants, and of course all modern medicines come from plants. In the case of Demdike, she lived in a small cottage on the far side of Pendle Hill, deep in the forest, known as Malkin Tower. Now, Malkin Tower sounds great, doesn't it, really? But Malkin Tower would have been a hovel, a one-roomed limestone hovel. She had lost her husband, but had a daughter called Elizabeth Device. She had 3 children, James, Alison, Jeanette Device. They lived at Malkin Tower. Just on the other side of the hill is a little village called Newchurch in Pendle, where Betsy Chadwick and her daughter Anne Redfern lived. These were the main Pendle Witches, but many, many other names will come to our story as we advance into it. Our story really starts way back on the 18th of March 1612 when Alison Device left Malkin Tower. Alison is 14. She's the granddaughter of Demdike. She walked across the whole length of Pendle Hill down to the very end of the hill where she met a Halifax peddler called John Law. When I say peddler, John Law was basically a walking salesman. A large pack in his back full of 1612 luxuries. He would go to Newchurch, to Barley, to Blackow, to Ruffley, to Cone, to Downham and Clitheroe, just to sell his wares. He was a bit like a walking newspaper, if you will. He met young Alison at the far end of Pendle Hill. Alison begged of him, "Oh, please, sir, you can spare just a couple of pins to pin me clothing together, sir. Just a couple of pins. Get away with you. I'm not taking me pack off of you, lass. You've got no money. You're no use to me." All of a sudden, according to John Law, the Halifax peddler, out of the mist, out of the heather, out of the bracken on the side of Pendle Hill, appeared a huge black dog with snarling white teeth and glowing red eyes, and the dog sat next to Alison. The dog turned to look at Alison, and the dog talked. "Alison, I can lame him for you." "Lame him!" she screamed. Law felt this terrible pain in his left arm, his left leg, and collapsed on the far slopes of Pendle Hill, on the Cone to Trawden slopes. The kind people of Cone, a town in North Pendle, they could see him. They got a stretch team together. They carried him down to an old inn called the Greyhound Inn. in the centre of Cone, which is long since gone. The landlord, John Edrington, spoon-fed him, cleaned him, and as Law's voice returned, he shouted, "I've been cursed! There's a witch in the forest, a young lass with a dog. I swear to you, I heard the dog talk. She's in league with devil. Send letters back to me son." Letters were sent back to Halifax, and John Law's eldest son, Abraham, received the first letter. "Hey, my father's in trouble. Better go and collect him." He set off from Halifax, arrived in the Greyhound Inn at Cone, walked into the inn, and saw his father in a twisted and contorted state. "Father, what's happened to you, man? You look terrible." "Abraham, I've been cursed. I met a young lass in the forest with a dog. I swear to you, I heard the dog talk. She's in league with devil. I want you, lad. Go and find her, bring her here, reverse the curse." Well, Abraham must have been a very brave Yorkshire lad. He set off and walked deep into the forest of Pendle, a scene almost like a Hansel and Gretel, twisting pathways through a huge, deciduous forest. He came to the cottage called Malkin Tower. Hammered on the door opened. There was James Devise, Alison's brother. "Can I help you, sir?" "I want to see Alison Devise. My father wants to see her. Where is she?" "In here, sir." Alison came to the door. "Right, lass, you're coming with me." Against her wishes, against her will, she was dragged from the small cottage known as Malkin Tower, through the forest of Pendle, and down into the town of Cone, and into the Greyhound Inn, where she made contact with John Law. John Law, the Halifax peddler, looked up from his bed and shouted, "It's you, York witch! You cursed me last, didn't you, that dog you had? I heard it talk." This 14-year-old girl, on bended knees, begged and begged and begged forgiveness. She had no idea she'd just admitted to a state capital offence of witchcraft. And strange enough, John Law, the Halifax peddler, was about to forgive her, and the whole story would have ended there. But not his son Abraham. "Oh no, we'll have you for this. I'm gonna go and get magistrate." And in doing so, Abraham Law opened the 1612 Pendle witch trials. The local magistrate was called Roger Noel. He lived in the village of Reed, which is to the east of Clitheroe. He lived at Reed Hall. He was in charge of the whole area. He had his book of demonology, was fully aware of the king's paranoia, and also fully aware if he could incriminate this young girl, he was going to curry favour with the King of England personally. Alison was arrested by the sheriffs of the Forest of Pendle, brought to Reed Hall, Burnley, and brought him in front of the local magistrate, Roger Noel. There she burst into tears and begged forgiveness for laming John Law, the Halifax peddler. She gave Roger Noel a lot more information. "Me grandmother Demdike, she's a witch. So is Betsy Chadwick and her daughter Anne Redfern. We have familiars, sir." "Familiars," said Roger Noel. "Yes, sir, dogs. Tib, Ball, Fancy, Dandy. These dogs belong to the four of us, sir. They came to us at different times of our lives, sir, and they talked to us. They said that they could give us special powers, sir, if they would let us suckle from our flesh, sir, and take our souls, sir. They tell us to fashion clay pictures." "Clay pictures?" said Roger Noel. "Yes, sir, dolls made of clay. But we have taken hair and teeth off corpses at Newchurch Cemetery, sir. We then are told by the dogs to select a victim. We then crumble the clay picture over the fire, sir, and people die, sir." Now, Roger Noel, the local magistrate, wasn't scared. He was actually quite delighted. He had a confession. He gave orders to the sheriffs of the forest to arrest Demdike, Chattox and Redfern. They were brought straight to Reed Hall, Burnley, where they met young Alison. And this huge argument erupted amongst the four of them. Now, there was no love between Chattox and Demdike because they were both involved in the same trade, making herbal remedies, you could say local medicines, and in the winter months they would beg. Now, they had a keen dislike for each other, so they tried to blame each other for the witchcraft. They tried to blame each other for these dogs that gave them special powers. But in doing so, the four of them actually self-incriminated. And they made the long journey from the slopes of Pendle Hill, right over the Trough of Bowland, and into the city of Lancaster, where they were thrown into what we call the Well Tower, which is still there to this very day. Deep, deep underground dungeon. As you walk down there, the light behind you fades. They are chained to the floor in absolutely appalling conditions. In the meantime, on the slopes of Pendle Hill, at the little cottage called Malkin Tower, Elizabeth Devise is very worried about her mother Demdike. She's very worried about her daughter Alison Devise, and she organises on Good Friday 1612 what has gone down in history as the Good Friday meeting, where all these other so-called witches met on the slopes of Pendle Hill at Malkin Tower. The whole idea of this meeting apparently was to get a potion together to blow the gates of Lancaster City Castle open and rescue their loved ones. Alison's brother James slaughtered the sheep from Pendle Hill. They dined on fresh mutton. They got a cauldron, a cooking vessel. They lit a fire beneath the cooking vessel, and the black syrupy liquid inside began to bubble and steam. And into that black bubbling liquid went crushed powdered human teeth, the odd clay pitcher, and indeed the odd human scalp. The whole idea apparently was to get a potion together to blow the gates of Lancaster City Castle open and rescue their loved ones, but nothing happened. What did happen is word reached the ears of the local magistrate, Roger Noel, and he gave orders that every single person who had attended the Good Friday meeting should be arrested immediately. When word filtered into the forest of Pendle of imminent arrests, 3 people thought, there's no way we're hanging around. Christopher Howgate and his wife Barbara, Isabel Sigroves, they just literally disappeared and made their way to West Yorkshire, but in doing so, they saved their lives. The ones that were successfully arrested from the Good Friday meeting are as follows: Jeanette Preston of Gisborne, West Yorkshire; Catherine Hewitt, Alice Gray of Combe; Elizabeth Devise, James Devise, Jeanette Devise of Malkin Tower; John and Jane Bulcott from Blackhoe, a mother and son farmers; and the real star of the show, a lady called Alice Nutter of Roughlee. They are all sent to Lancaster, with the exception of the 2 Jeanettes. Jeanette Preston comes from Gisborne, West Yorkshire, so therefore she is sent to the city of York. Her husband went with her. Villagers went with her. But there she was found guilty of attending the Good Friday meeting in Lancashire, but also the murder of her employer, Mr. Thomas Lister. She'd been nursing him. He had died. She wrapped his body in a clean white sheet ready for burial, and 2 days before the burial she touched the sheet and some fresh blood came from the sheeting. This was classed as witchcraft. She made a plea of not guilty, but the jury in York found her guilty of witchcraft. She was executed on the 27th of July 1612 in the city of York at a place called Whitmar Watmergate at the bottom of the Shambles. The other Jeanette, the little girl called Jeanette Devise, who lived at Malkin Tower, she apparently was sent to live with the local magistrate. She had no idea, but she was going to play a very, very important role in the prosecution of her entire family. She was brought into court on the 17th of August 1612, wearing nice clothes, and was picked up by Roger Noel, the local magistrate, and put on top of the desk so the jury could see her. Now, Roger Noel had written to the king personally, and the king was absolutely delighted. He sent 2 circuit judges from the city of London, James Altham, Edmund Bromley, and a young boy called Thomas Potts, and that's why we're here now, because in 1613, Thomas Potts, who was clerk to the courts, wrote a book called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in Lancashire, which later would earn him a lot of money. It's the only record, the only window we have into this whole story. What we do know is he was very loyal to the king, so there's no way he'd want to upset him. The jury at Lancaster were all male. Women were not allowed to attend, and there was no defence counsel because no one dared defend the Pendle witches, because this would actually upset the King of England personally. The trial was a bit of a sham. Little Jeanette was brought in and put on top of her desk by Roger Noel so the jury could see her, and there she told the jury how she'd seen these 4 dogs arrive and how these dogs had talked to Demdike, Chattox, Redfern, and indeed Alison and James Devise, and told them to fashion clay pictures and to crumb the clay pictures. The jury, of course, believed every word this little girl was saying because they thought it would be impossible that anyone could be manipulated. Her mother Elizabeth was in court, and her mother said, "Stop it, Jeanette, you don't know what you're saying, stop it." Jeanette's reply was, "Have my mother removed from the court, she's upsetting me, sir." One person that did defy the court to the very end was indeed Demdike, over 85 years old. She died in the dungeons before the trials began. However, in her absence, she was found guilty of the murder of the child of Richard Baldwin, a miller's son from Burnley, the murder of Christopher Howgate, and indeed the murder of Henry Mitten of Roughlee by witchcraft. Next person up was the one they were feared the most, Betsy Chadwick. Thomas Potts in his book describes her as being a skeleton in rags. The poor woman had been chained to the floor in total darkness, lying in her own waste. And when she came to court, it was not a pleasant sight. And as you can imagine, not a pleasant aroma either. There she admitted to witchcraft. She admitted to the murder of Hugh and Anne Moore, Anne and Robert Nutter, and indeed John Devise, by making the clay pictures, by crumbling the clay pictures and cursing these people over a matter of months and years. Then came James Devise. Now James was classed really as a dimwit, a complete dimwit. He'd self-incriminated himself. He'd told the court how he'd seen his dogs arrive, like his sister Jeanette. And he freely admitted to the murder of Hugh and Blaise Hargreaves, Anne Townley and John Duckworth by cursing them. And these people had died, not straight after each other, but over a period of time. Then came young Alison. Now Alison was brought into court, and Alison was convinced that she had indeed lamed John Law, the Halifax peddler. John Law was in court that day, and the judges said, "Is there any way you could reverse this curse on this gentleman?" "Only my mother can do that, sir, and she is dead." And she was found guilty of witchcraft. Then came Catherine Hewitt of Cone. Catherine was found guilty of horse theft, but also cursing a horse. Her nickname was Mould Heels. She was also found guilty of witchcraft. However, her friend Alice Gray of Cone was found innocent of the crimes against her. She seems to be the most luckiest person that day. Now, this is where the story does have a very, very dark and sinister twist. And if ever Steven Spielberg could see this broadcast, which I wish he could do, he would have a Hollywood blockbuster. In the courts that day were three people who made pleas of not guilty: John and Jane Bulcock, mother and son, and this incredible lady called Alice Nutter, who is the huge star of the whole proceedings. Now, in 1612, women were not allowed to possess a brain. It was believed by some men that women didn't even have a brain. And when it came to male chauvinism, women were treated very, very badly. Alice is a person that we all tend to admire in this part of the world because she really was an incredibly brave lady. She had seen Roger Nowell relating to land disputes. She lived at a place called Ruffley Hall. Ruffley Hall is still there to this very day. It's now surrounded by a modern housing estate, but a beautiful, beautiful hall. Everyone was shocked that she had been arrested and was actually brought into court with the rest of the Pendle witches. The accusations against her was the murder of Henry Mitten of Ruffley, but also aiding Demdike and Alison Devise in his murder and begging for a penny. It's blatantly obvious that she didn't need to beg because she was a woman of great wealth. There's no two ways about it. Now, it has been said, never confirmed or denied, that my relatives all came from this part of the world, and my great-great-grandmother brought this story down to my grandmother, to my mother. And it has been said that Alice had complained about land disputes. She'd seen Roger Nowell, he'd done nothing about it, so she made her way to Lancaster to see the senior magistrates. She walked into a court session to the words, "It's a woman! A woman! Get her out! A woman!" She grabbed hold of the furniture, she wouldn't let go, and the judges said, "Well, let her have her say." In one day, she won her land disputes fairly and squarely, and as she left Lancaster City Castle as a free woman, with all her deeds with her and all her lands restored, there was a very, very annoyed, really annoyed Roger Nowell. He thought, this woman has gone over my head, along with John and Jane Bulcock, two local farmers. They've embarrassed me in front of the senior magistrates. I need to get rid of them. How can I get rid of them? The trump card up my sleeve. The little girl, Jeanette Devise. For the second time that day, he picked her up on top of the desk so the jury could see her. And he said to young Jeanette, "Jeanette, these three people here, John and Jane Bulcock, Alice Nutter, were they at your home on Pendle Hill on Good Friday, 1612, at Malkin Tower?" "They were, sir." A look of shock and horror came across Alice, John and Jane's face as they realised on the evidence of this little girl they were indeed being incriminated. So we've got a situation where Demdike, Chattox, Redfern, Alison Devise, James Devise, Elizabeth Devise, Catherine Hewitt all admit to witchcraft, but these three don't. They don't. And it looks like they've been set up. It looks like they've been set up. They made pleas of not guilty, but they were all found guilty of attending the Good Friday meeting, and they even had an identity parade, but young Jeanette picked them out again as being at the Good Friday meeting at Malkin Tower. The Pendle witches were all executed in the city of Lancaster at a place called the Pillory. There they had to climb into rostrums, hands tied behind their backs, ropes around their necks, and then the stools were kicked up underneath them. These poor people did not hang, they strangled to death. It has been said, never confirmed or denied, that as the rope was placed around Alice Nutter's neck, she very bravely turned to watch this huge crowd gather to watch the execution. She looked down and she could see Roger Noel holding the hand of the little girl, and she shouted, "I shall haunt you for the rest of your life." Then the stools were kicked up underneath them. What is very, very tragic about the whole story is this little girl, Jeanette, watched her whole family die. The people from Cone die, the landowners die, and as soon as they stopped twitching the pillory, Roger Noel said, "Goodbye." "But sir, surely, I'm going back to that lovely house of yours, sir, surely, goodbye." He'd used her. We do know she lived because she made the long, long journey back the slopes of Pendle Hill, back to a cold and empty cottage. And she must have known that her evidence had claimed the lives of everyone accused of witchcraft. 3 years later, she is rearrested. A young boy called Edmund Robinson is walking through the forest of Pendle and sees her commit acts of witchcraft. With her family reputation, this is taken very seriously. She's rushed to Lancaster. The poor girl is stripped naked and looked at by practitioners. Down to London, back up north again, down to London, back up north again. After 3 long years, this person, Robinson, said, "Actually, I made it all up. I didn't see her do anything." So you could say that witchcraft, or indeed the superstition surrounding it, absolutely destroyed that young girl's life and indeed her family. We do know the 2 circuit judges, James Altham, Edmund Bromley, are knighted. Thomas Potts writes his book, which earned him a fortune, called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in Lancashire, first produced in 1613. You can buy it today, and it is a riveting read, but in some ways a bit biased towards the accused. What we do find amazing, and do go into Google search and just mention the White Witch of Pendle, and what you will see is the last piece of snow melting on the side of Pendle Hill in the perfect shape of a white witch. And if you were to visit Pendle Hill on Halloween, Pendle Hill looks more like Wembley Stadium, because people from all over the world, all over the country, will converge on this famous hill to not so much commemorate, but in the hope that they will in fact come across the spirits of these people. Do I think they were witches? Well, there was something very strange going on, that's for sure. I think John and Jane and Alice were totally innocent of the crimes against them, but the rest may have been involved in something very, very, very dangerous. It certainly cost them their lives, and according to His Majesty's courts, they were found guilty of witchcraft. It's been an absolute pleasure being in Bridlington Paranormal Investigation teams today, and I'm a huge fan of Yorkshire, folks. And thank you very much indeed for watching.
Thank you very much, Simon, really appreciate that.
My pleasure, Paul.
So that was our history with Simon there. Thank you very much to him for taking the time out to come and see us. Now obviously we will be on Pendle Hill tonight. The plan is to go live, but it all depends on signal. We've obviously got our phones and we've got other camera equipment with us, so if there's not a possibility that we can do live feeds, then everything will be recorded, and obviously we'll be posting it to the group and our YouTube channel. But hopefully we shall speak to you all tonight. Thank you for watching, guys.